matter, because we've seen documentaries about this particular person, and I mean, this is I Want to Dance with Somebody. It runs for 2 hours and 24 minutes. It's M-rated, and the tumultuous life of the world's most awarded female vocalist is put under the spotlight in this film. We're talking about Whitney Houston, played by Naomi Ackie. I don't think there's any question, the greatest voice of a generation. She enjoyed the highest of highs and succumbed to excess, indulgence, and heartache. I mean, tragically, she died at 48, and her only child followed suit when she was only 22. Now, the fact that this woman, Whitney Houston, had a remarkable voice was obvious when she sang in church, but nurturing and perfecting it, well, that was rather tough, because her mother, Sissy, played by Tamara Tunie, quite some singer herself, was the head of the choir, where Whitney was the soloist, and she was a very, very tough taskmaster, the mother. So she was a perfectionist. She implored Whitney to pronounce every word very, very clearly, to round the words, and to recognise and appreciate that each song told a story. And she was the one telling it, so there was a responsibility there. And Sissy and her husband, John, played by Clark Peters, had a particularly volatile relationship. He's presented as fiery, as controlling, very manipulative. A chance meeting with no-nonsense Robin Crawford, played by Nafessa Williams, proved timely and liberating for Whitney. The pair became best friends. They moved in together. And then Whitney got a big break. She performed in front of the head of Arista Records, a famed record producer by the name of Clive Davis. Stanley Tucci fills that role. He was a Harvard Law graduate. His previous successes in the music industry, you talk about the likes of Barry Manilow, Simon and Garfunkel, just to name a couple of them. He was at another record label before he basically started Arista. Davis immediately signed up Whitney and lovingly nurtured her career, which took off and soared. She was the preeminent singer of her day, but more riches would have followed with the release of the movie The Bodyguard. She, of course, starred opposite Kevin Costner in that one. But tensions remained, and they remained due to the close relationship that Whitney developed with Robin Crawford, the young woman I mentioned, and her father's management style. And then she met Bobby Brown, played by Ashton Sanders. That became the best of times and very much the worst of times. Soaring above all of this, though, in this biopic written by Anthony McCartan, who was the man behind Bohemian Rhapsody, is Whitney's big, big voice. Her extraordinary ability to reach notes that others could only dream of. And not only just to reach these notes, but to then hold them. I mean, quite something to listen to. Indeed, she rounds every word and note. She savours it, as do her adoring fans, millions upon millions globally. And she became the only artist to do what the Beatles couldn't do, for example, achieve 7 consecutive #1 singles on the Billboard Hot 100 chart. So, look, whilst it's a warts and all portrayal of the life and times of a vocal genius based on the other things that I've seen, the documentaries and the readings, I reckon it appears that her down times with Bobby Brown were not given fulsome treatment here, Peter. What did you think?
Look, I agree. This is a very sanitized version of Whitney Houston's life. And that's what disappointed me. It looks like the family gave permission for the film to be made, because we see lots of photos at the end credits of the real Whitney Houston and her family, etc. And I think that's a big mistake, because you're bordering on hagiography. In other words, you're downplaying any of the negative or other aspects of someone's life, and you're only showing the positive. Her relationship with Bobby Brown was obviously much more fraught and more difficult than was presented on screen in this film version. I mean, there's also been a 2015 TV movie called Whitney, which was much shorter but dealt more with her relationship with Bobby Brown, but nevertheless always had the Whitney Houston music. But also it downplays her drug addiction. We see
Peter, there are a few scenes where they're shown up, but yeah, I mean, it could certainly have been made more of, no question.
Very briefly, and it is very quickly cut away. Cassie Lemon, who directed this film, has used swirling camera work to try and paper over some of the aspects of the dialogue, which I think sometimes is not particularly good, and also some of the characterizations. This is a film that I call a could have been. In fact, even the title doesn't work for me. I Want to Dance with Somebody. Perhaps The Greatest Love, or something that showed more about the Whitney Houston character, because really I Want to Dance with Somebody means nothing apart from being one of her hit songs. So, and the writer, Anthony McCartan, who wrote Bohemian Rhapsody, which similarly was also, I thought, sanitized and poorly written at times. I think this biopic is very unfortunately not a good film, and that disappointed me, because hearing Whitney Houston's voice, because it's largely her voice, 95% of it anyway is her voice in the film. Naomi Ackie does well to mime her, but of course Whitney Houston, great singer. But I think this film does her a disservice in terms of Houston's story. It papers over also very quickly The Bodyguard. What happened to the film that was so important to her, opposite Kevin Costner, dismissed in a few minutes? I mean, it's just, and she was in 2 other films as well. Look, there's so much that was missing in this film that I was very disappointed by the end of it. I thought it was going to be a much better film.
Well, I mean, Naomi Ackie brings emotion and gravitas to the role. As Whitney at her best, she is a shining light. At her worst, a broken shell. The one that really impressed me, I thought Tamara Tooney was really grounded in her portrayal of a mother who knows just how special a gift her daughter has, but isn't willing to cut her any slack. Jacqui, was there anything meritorious in this movie from your perspective?
Oh, gee, I think Peter said it all, and I think he's read my mind. Possibly the only thing I would really add, and I do agree with everything you've said, Peter, the only thing I'd add is the dialogue as well. It was like a TV soapy dialogue. It didn't push the narrative or give any depth or any understanding to what was going on. It simply was almost like ticking the boxes and stating what was happening that we could see on the screen at that moment. So, no, the singing obviously rose up, yes, but I agree even, Peter, with the title, what you said about the title of it. I walked away thinking that wasn't the title that matches the film at all. So, yeah. Yeah,
well, Clark Peters, he brings some swagger and sleaze to his portrayal of John Huston, and Nafessa Williams adds spice and spark as Robin Crawford, whose journey with Whitney is, well, far from straightforward. Then there's a lot of warmth in the portrayal by Stanley Tucci, the sort of warmth and smarts that he brings to the piece as a record executive with an open door policy for his most successful client. Dave, any respite from the negativity or not?
No, look, I thought the only thing that saved this film was Naomi Ackie and Stanley Tucci's performances, because the rest of this film was just a Hallmark version of Whitney Houston's life. There was parts of this film that I almost want to use the word I found offensive. The line where Whitney's saying to Bobby Brown, "I don't blame you for what's happened with my life." It's like, I almost wanted to get up and rip the seat out of the floor and throw it at the screen. This film, I know her family wanted this to be a film that looked at the legacy of Whitney Houston and her music, but you've also got to go back and take the bad with the good. This is a performer whose career was tragically, and life was cut short by drugs and abuse in her life. And to not show that, I thought was very, very disrespectful to her legacy, and also to other people who have been through similar things. And they couldn't even bring themselves to make reference to the fact that her daughter had passed away either at the end of the film. I thought that was very, very disrespectful. But I guess this is what happens when you get a family wanting to put together a movie about somebody's legacy. They don't want to show that dark side, but I think we needed to see that, because I think this ends up being a film that feels untrue. It feels very Hallmarky, and like Jacqui said, the dialogue in this sometimes feels like Days of Our Lives. the scene where she's told that she can't see her girlfriend anymore, so she just turns around and says, "Okay, Daddy," it just doesn't ring true. Like, there must have been inner turmoil inside Whitney Houston at moments like that, and it just does not come through in this film.
Well, look, I also thought it became unnecessarily stretched. It did not need to be the length it was, especially in that final half hour. My involvement waned somewhat during that particular period of time. I should, before we give our scores, I should mention that in terms of, because I said that our good friend Greg has given us some scores at least. Triangle of Sadness he gave an 8 out of 10 to as well. For I Want to Dance with Somebody, he gives it a 6 out of 10. Dave, what are you giving it?
I'm giving it a 4 out of 10.
Wow. Jacqui?
Yes, for being tedious and superficial. I actually did not enjoy I Want to Dance with Somebody. I gave it a 3 out of 10.
And Peter Krausz?
I wish it was a better biopic, and I wish it was more dramatically charged than it was. Because of Whitney Houston's wonderful singing, her soundtrack and music is so great. I'll give it a 5 out of 10, but I'm being a little generous, I think.
Yeah, I enjoyed it more than you, all three of you did. I'm giving it a 7 out of 10. So that's I Want to Dance with Somebody. This is the Whitney Houston story. This is JAir 88 FM.